everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is for the Prairie Girl Crossbody bag from Emmaline Bags. Now this bag is so stinking cute. It has like a very basic shape, but it is not basic by any means. This bag has a lot going on to it. Before we get started, I want you to know that this is not a beginner level bag. It's not advertised as a beginner bag on the pattern instructions either. This is an intermediate to advanced level bag. Now, it's not incredibly difficult, but it's not easy either. I just want you to know that going in. However, I'm showing you every single step today, so if I can do it, you can do it. So first, let's talk about the front of the bag. We have this beautiful little like clamshell pocket here. When you open up this pocket, inside you have 6 card slot pockets, 2 large like pockets for bills or for small pieces of paper. In the center, you have a pen loop to hold your pens. You also have a small in the lining zip pocket. Then when you look at the top of the bag, you have 2 zippers. And look at that, both of the zippers are going in the same direction. That's new for me. So you have 2 zippers, both have their own very large compartments. And then on the back, we just have a nice basic design. I do think it would be cool to add a little pocket here on the back, just maybe like a little zip pocket. I know when I wear my crossbody bags, I like having a pocket that's right against my body. So I think a zipper pocket right here would be a great adjustment to this. The bag has 2 rectangle rings or D-rings or circle rings, whatever kind of ring you want, and then a nice crossbody strap. Now, the pattern does call for 1 1/4 inch hardware. I don't actually have 1 1/4 inch hardware, but I'm going to be using 1 inch hardware in the pattern today, and I'm going to tell you what adjustments I make to these side tabs right here as well to the crossbody strap in order to accommodate 1 inch hardware everywhere. So let's see what this bag looks like on. All right, so I'm on my little step stool here, and you can see it hangs so nicely. It really is the perfect size bag. It has a nice shape, it hangs really well. I can wear it on one shoulder. If I want to wear it as a crossbody bag, it also works perfect for that. It really is just such a nice shape and a really clean look. I love the overall shape of this bag. Now for this first bag here, I used a faux leather vinyl, which it has like a nice drape to it. It's not a very stiff vinyl. To beef it up a little bit, I added some Decoville Light, and I did not use fusible fleece. The pattern calls for fusible fleece, but I kind of just wanted to give it a try with Decoville Light. I do like the firmness of the bag. It does feel very professional. It definitely looks very professional. However, in today's tutorial, we will be using fusible fleece, except for the exterior, we're gonna use waterproof canvas. We're gonna give that one a try. So thank you so much to Janelle once again for allowing me to film videos using your patterns. I absolutely adore Emmaline Bags patterns. Janelle does such a good job of giving you every single little bit of detail in the pattern so that you are not lost at any point. I think that with the pattern in hand, with your cut list, with the video, you cannot fail at this bag. I would highly suggest you give yourself a few days, especially the first time you're making this bag. Give yourself a day to cut all the material out and get everything fused, and then give yourself another 1 or 2 days to actually construct the bag. There are some difficult parts of this bag that you don't expect, honestly. Like there's some spots where you think you're going to be spending a lot of time, like for the card slot pockets. That's actually pretty simple, but the last bit of constructing the bag can be a little challenging. My best advice to you is to just take your time and take lots of breaks. So if you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. At the top of the comment section will be a comment from me, and it will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. This is going to be a longer video today. It is a bag that takes more time. Make sure you utilize those timestamps. If there's just one spot you're stuck on, click on the number next to that timestamp and it'll take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. So in today's bag, we're gonna mix up the material just a little bit. For the exterior of the bag, I'm gonna use waterproof canvas, except for that front accent pocket. For that pocket, I'm gonna use this beautiful quilt cotton right here. You're gonna need a total of 3/4 yard of fabric for the exterior portion of the bag. For the lining of the bag, you're gonna need 1 1/4 yards of fabric. Now I'm gonna be using this beautiful purple fabric for most of the lining, but then for the card slots in the pocket, I'm actually gonna switch it up with this little smiley, happy, crazy face fabric right here. Next, we have the interfacing. You're gonna need 3 yards of fusible woven interfacing. I know it's a lot, but you do have a lot of interfacing to do here. Almost anything that's quilt cotton is going to be interfaced with this woven interfacing. Now, if you're using any sort of vinyl, cork, or waterproof canvas, you don't need to interface that with the woven interfacing. You're also gonna need a 1/2 yard of fusible fleece. This is what's gonna beef up the bag a little bit. Like I said, in the first bag I made, I used Decoville Light. So today we're gonna try the fusible fleece and just kind of see what the difference is. I won't be using this today, but I do highly suggest you use the Craft Fuse from Pellon for the interfacing for the card slots. Craft Fuse is like a piece of paper, and when it gets warm, it gets nice and loose and gummy, but then when it dries, it's very firm like paper. It's perfect for card slot pockets. I'm not using it today, but I do highly recommend using this for that portion of the bag. Here's all of our zippers and hardware for today. You can see I'm really mixing it up. For the zipper that goes around that curved pocket on the front of the bag, I'm using this zipper tape with this little accent zipper pull. For the top of the bag, you have 2 longer zippers. I'll be using this white zipper tape for that. I'm also using that same white zipper tape for the inside of the pocket on the front of the bag. You're gonna need 2 rectangle rings. I don't have 1 1/4 inch hardware, so I'll be using 1 inch hardware today, and I will show you how I adjust the pattern to deal with that. You're gonna also need 1 strap slider. Again, I'll be using a 1 inch slider. However, the pattern does call for a 1 1/4 inch slider. And you're gonna also need just like a small 4-inch cut of elastic. I happen to have this velvet elastic on hand from a previous project, so I'll be using that. This will just be used to hold that pen on the inside accent pocket. So here's a bunch of the other stuff we'll be using today. First, my Beacon 3-in-1 glue. I love using this. It's really helpful at attaching pretty much anything. Then I have my stiletto and seam ripper here, a small pair of snips, a good pair of fabric scissors, 2 marking tools. One is an air erasing marker and another one is just a white chalk marker. A turning tool. I'm not sure where I got this one, but I will try to find a link for it and put it down in the description. I'll be using Microtex 8012 needles, Mara 100 thread, some double-sided sticky tape from Dritz, and then a large amount of clips. No, Boots, this is not helpful. It's not helpful. So here are all the pattern pieces for the bag used with the templates provided. I do suggest you print 2 copies of all of the templates so that way you have one that's your fusible fleece cut and then one that's your fabric cut. Any piece of these templates that is quilt cotton, you need to interface with some sort of woven interfacing. So for me, it's my woven fuse. The pieces that you're going to interface with either your Decoville Light or your fusible fleece are going to be your front exterior accent pocket. And remember, this is a smaller cut than the fabric itself. Your side gussets, your exterior back panel, your exterior front panel, and then your strap tabs that go on the side of the bag will not be interfaced with any sort of fusible fleece. So here are all of the other cuts that don't have templates. You're going to need a nice long cut for your strap. You're going to need an exterior cut for the bottom of your bag, and this will also have that smaller cut of fusible fleece on it. You have a small skinny exterior cut that's going to be the divider between the 2 top zippers. You're going to have a lining cut. This is for the zip pocket on the inside of that accent pocket. You have a few cuts for your card slot pockets, and then you're going to have some zipper tabs for that accent zipper pocket on the front of the bag. So first, let's build that interior zip pocket that's going to be on the inside of that front accent pocket. First, you're going to want to draw your little rectangle at the top of the shorter edge for that pocket piece. In the pattern, she gives you the exact measurements for this and exactly how to draw it. And before we attach this, let's just go ahead and mark midpoints. It's going to make it easier. So take your lining piece and fold it in half so that we can find the midpoint of that top curved edge as well as that long flat bottom edge. So I just fold it in half and then I just cut a tiny, tiny triangle off right on the fold. I'm going to do the top and the bottom this way. Now I'm going to find the midpoint on this top short edge using the same method. All right, once you have your midpoints marked, grab a ruler and measure 1.5 inches down from the top curved edge of your lining panel. Do your best to get this as straight as possible. You might want to line up the bottom straight edge with the grid lines on your ruler first. And then what you want is for this top marked line on the back of your lining pocket to be right along the bottom edge of your ruler. So I just lift up my ruler and slide in my lining pocket, and then try to make sure you're matching up the midpoints of your lining and your zipper pocket as well. So once you have that all lined up and centered, grab some pins and just pin your lining piece to that pocket piece, just to hold it in place at the sewing machine. Okay, now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to stitch right along that marked rectangle. So if you have any sort of side lines from your measurement, just don't worry about that. We're just worried about this interior 3/8 of an inch tall rectangle. We're just gonna sew along that entire marked line. Okay, once you have that stitched down, you can remove your pins. And now just grab your seam ripper and rip along that middle marked line just enough so that you can grab your scissors and cut along that line. Cut to the very tip of that triangle that you marked, and then follow the edges of the triangle down to the corners. And you want to cut as close as you possibly can to those corners without cutting the thread. Once you have one side cut, go ahead and repeat the process for the other side. Once you have that opening cut, go ahead and take that pocket piece and insert it through the hole. And we're just gonna pull all of the edges of that pocket piece so that they're wrong sides together with the wrong side of your curved lining piece. So I just like to give it a finger press first, all the way around. Do your best to kind of roll that seam so it's nice and straight. So what I do is I finger press one edge really well, and then I grab my iron and run my iron over that edge. And then I'll work on the opposite edge and the smaller edges on the side. And that way it's a little bit easier to keep everything straight if you just deal with one edge at a time. The iron I'm using today is this Chi iron. Okay, once you have the back press, flip it over, and let's just press it on the front as well. Make sure that you roll this again if anything looks a little wonky. Next, grab your zipper. Now this is just a zipper that I cut too short on a previous project, so it has a zipper tab on it. Just ignore that, we're gonna cut all that off. And you want your zipper, when closed, to be on the left side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my double-sided tape, and I'm going to run it along both of the long edges of my zipper tape. And I'm keeping it right on that edge. I'm not letting it get too close to the zipper because I want this to be hidden in the end result. I don't want this sticky tape to be seen when the zipper is completed. Okay, so now I just move my zipper up, and then I'm going to remove the paper on the bottom edge first. Then I'm gonna grab my lining pocket with the hole, and with the lining right side up, I'm just going to take it and center it on my zipper tape. Like I said, my zipper tape is much longer than it needs to be. And then once I have it centered, I'm just gonna push down on that bottom edge, pull my zipper through, and pull it all the way to the left so I can get it nice and straight. Now all I have to do is fold up the top of my lining panel, pull off the paper from that top edge of the zipper, and then fold down the top of the lining right on top of the zipper tape. There we go. Now it's all nice and straight. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and just sew around this opening at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that zipper sewn down, go ahead and turn this so that your lining pocket is wrong side up. Take the bottom edge of that zipper pocket and fold it up to meet the top edge of the zipper pocket. And just line up all 3 edges. Grab some clips and just clip along all 3 of those edges. All right, once you have those 3 edges clipped, turn it so that it's lining right side up again. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold the lining out of the way, and we're gonna sew along the vertical edges first at a 3/8 inch seam allowance along the left and along the right. If you have that tape stuck like I do, go ahead and trim down that tape so it doesn't get in the way at the machine. So we want to sew through both of the pocket and the zipper tape on the sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to flip up the top out of the way, and we're going to sew as close as we can right along this top edge. You can give yourself 2 rows of stitches here, one right along that edge and another 1/8 of an inch away. We just want to make sure that the top edge of our lining never gets caught in the zipper, so we just get nice and close. Use a zipper foot for this part. All right, once you have the pocket fully sewn, just fold the lining out of the way and trim down that zipper tape. All right, your little interior zip pocket is now done and it's adorable. You can go ahead and put this to the side. Now grab both of your credit card pocket panels and lay them right side down. And then using the instructions in the pattern, mark your 6 lines across both panels. So once you have your lines marked on both of your panels, I do suggest marking the top of each one, just so you know which way we're folding everything. So starting at this top line right here, I'm gonna fold my fabric right sides together. So I'm just folding right along that line. And if you're using craft fuse, this is very easy to do. You can actually just fold it all by finger pressing it first and then iron it. But since I'm using the woven fuse here, it's going to be a little bit more work. And you can see that when I applied my woven interfacing to this, I did not reduce the size of it. That's going to make these side seams much more bulky. So I do suggest that when you're applying the interfacing, either craft fuse or woven fuse, to your credit card slots, you really want to make sure the width at the least is shorter than the width of the fabric, because these will get bulky. So then on that second line, we're gonna fold the fabric wrong sides together and keep everything as straight as possible. I like to make sure that the side edges are always straight. And then give it a finger press before you grab your iron, and then press along that edge as well. All right, for the third line, we're just gonna fold this right sides together, find that line, and then just finger press along it and press it with your iron. We're just gonna continue doing this back and forth for the rest of the 3 lines. So once you have one pocket set pressed, I suggest putting it to the side and keeping it lined up. I'm just gonna lay my ruler over it, so while it cools, it'll cool nice and flat. Grab your remaining card pocket piece with all the lines marked and then just do this exact same thing. All right, once you have both of your card slot pockets completely pressed, we're gonna take these to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the top edge of each fold. So each card pocket unit has 3 folded top edges. Just top stitch along all 3 of those edges on both pockets. So once you have those folds top stitched, just refold your card slot pocket so it's all straight again. You can add some clips to the side to help hold it in place really well. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and just baste along the short edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's just going to hold everything in place to make the next steps much easier. Once you have the sides basted down, grab your ruler and let's mark a vertical midpoint line going down the entire pocket. So you can use an air erasing marker for this or a chalk pencil. Chalk's always best, but since my fabric is so light, I'm gonna use the air erasing marker. And I'm just gonna mark down the center, just like that. Do the same on the other card slot pocket. So I marked my midpoint off by 1/4 of an inch, so I'm drawing the correct lines here. Good thing this is an air erasing marker. This extra line will erase on its own. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch over this midpoint mark that you just marked. Make sure you backstitch at the top of every single fold so that these pockets are nice and secure. All right, so now before we move on to the next step, go ahead and trim down the bottom edge of your card slot pocket so it's the correct height that's mentioned in the pattern. To do this, I actually like to use the grid marks on my cutting mat and then just cut along the edge. I find putting my ruler on top of the card slot pocket is a little difficult because it's kind of like a hill, it's wobbly. But if you line up the card slot pocket on your cutting mat, then it makes it much easier for you to then just take your ruler and cut off the bottom edge nice and clean. Okay, so now grab your 4 pocket sides and all we have to do is line them up right sides together along the short edges of our card slot pockets. So I'm just gonna fold it on top, line it up. It should match up perfectly since we just trimmed down our card slot pocket to the right height. Add some clips to hold it in place, and then do this for all 4 short edges of your card slot pockets. All right, so now take these to the sewing machine and sew along all 4 clipped edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these sides stitched on, you can just finger press them open and then grab your iron to press them open. There we go. And remember, these side pieces should not have any interfacing at all on them, so that should help keep it nice and thin. All right, now we're going to take these back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along these side seams at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have those sides top stitched on, grab the back of the pocket and lay that right side against the right side of the card slot pocket and line up along that top edge of the card slot pocket. So make sure you've got the right edge here. Grab some clips and just clip this in place along that edge. Repeat this for the other card slot pocket as well. Okay, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along these 2 clipped edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, now once you have that sewn, you can just press along that sewn edge, and then I press the back pocket panel up, and then I'll give it a press again, and then I'll fold the whole unit in half right along that top sewn edge. So it might be easiest if you line up the bottom raw edges first and clip those together, and then flip it over and then work on pressing that top folded edge. There we go. And then just give it a press. Go ahead and repeat this with your other card slot pocket. So once you have these 2 top edges pressed, let's take them to the sewing machine and just top stitch along those edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now grab that lining panel with the zipper attached and lay it right side up. Grab one of your card slot pockets, and with the card slots right side up, line up the bottom edge of the card slot pocket with the bottom edge of your lining panel. It should also match up on the sides. So just line it up and then use some clips to hold it all together. And then also add some clips to the side as well. The card slot pocket should overextend the top edge just a little bit since it's not rounded yet. Grab your other curved pocket lining panel and repeat this process, just matching up the card slot pockets along the bottom edge and then clipping in place. So now take these to the sewing machine and just base stitch along the 3 clipped edges. Once you have this basted on, I just flip it so that the wrong side is up, and then you can just trim down those top corners of your credit card pocket so it's nice and rounded. So now grab the lining pocket with that zipper, grab your elastic and cut off a 4-inch piece. If you have a pen of choice, go ahead and grab that. Take your elastic, wrap it around your pen so that it meets and it's nice and snug. And I'm just gonna mark that line just like that. Now you can add 3/4 of an inch to that marked line. So this right here is the curve that went around my pen, and then I'm gonna go 3/4 of an inch over away from that marked line and then cut. There we go. So now I just know this is an elastic piece that will keep my pen in place and be nice and snug. So now take your elastic and fold it wrong sides together and clip along the 2 edges. Take your lining pocket with that zipper pocket on there and then just clip this to the midpoint on the bottom, and that should be where the stitching is on your credit card pocket, just like that. All right, so now we can take this to the sewing machine and just baste down this elastic just to hold it in place. So you can take your 2 lining pieces and put them to the side. If you want to attach a bag label to the front of the exterior pocket, now's the time to do that. So first I'm just going to find the midpoints. So I'm gonna fold it so that the edges on the sides are meeting. And then I'm just going to clip along that top fold and also along the bottom fold. And now I have the midpoint on the top and bottom of my pocket marked. I'm gonna grab my ruler and I'm gonna line up my 6-inch mark on my ruler right on that midpoint line right there. And I'm gonna measure up 5 inches from the bottom. I'm gonna grab my pen and just mark a dot right at the top of that 6-inch mark. Then I can take the washer for my name tag and center it over that midpoint mark. And then I'm going to just mark the vertical lines for my washer placement. Now grab your seam ripper and then rip along that marked line. And it's always good to rip a little bit smaller than what you marked. You want this to be nice and tight on those prongs for your bag tag. Take your bag tag and then pull up those prongs and insert them into those slits. Flip it over. We already have fusible fleece here, so that's a good little bit of beef for this name tag. I'm gonna insert my washer over that and then close the prongs. And you can fold them in on one another or away from one another. Now I'm gonna grab a scrap piece of fusible fleece and just use my beacon glue on the back of it. So on that, rough glue side of your fusible fleece. And then with the glue side down, I'm just going to glue it over the back of my washer and prongs for my bag tag. This way the metal isn't gonna rub against the lining panels and end up causing a hole eventually. It just protects everything. And there we go. Now I have my bag tag attached to that pocket as an accent. You can put this exterior piece to the side. Now if you're using zipper tape, grab your zipper tape and cut it so that it is 15.5 inches long. Don't forget to add your zipper pull to your zipper. Now all we have to do is attach these zipper tabs. So take one of your zipper tabs and lay it right side down along the edge of your zipper so that the short edge of the tab should be along the short edge of your zipper. Just line that up and clip in place. Now you can just flip over your zipper, grab another one of your zipper tabs and lay it right side down over the back of your zipper and include it in the clips. Go ahead and repeat this on the other side. Okay, so now we can take the zipper to the sewing machine and sew along the short edges of our zipper tab and zipper tape at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have those sewn on, just pull your zipper tabs so that they're right side out and wrong sides together. I like to match up their short raw edges and clip. Do the same on the other side. And now take this back to the sewing machine and just top stitch along the zipper tabs at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Let's take our zipper and fold it in half so that we can find the midpoints. This is gonna make it easier to attach in the next step. So I'm just folding it in half. I'm pretty much just lining up the top stitching areas on my zipper tabs. And then I'll use my scissors to just cut a teeny tiny triangle. Just makes it easier to find those midpoints. So now grab that exterior A unit, and if you added your bag tag, you probably already have a midpoint mark marked on the top. If you don't have a midpoint mark there yet, go ahead and fold this in half and mark that top midpoint mark. Grab your zipper and make sure that the zipper pull when closed is all the way on the left, and then fold this right side down. Match up the midpoint mark on your zipper with that top midpoint mark on your A unit and clip in place. And then take the right edge, the bottom of your zipper tab, and line it up with the bottom edge of that exterior A unit, and then just clip in place, just like that. Now you're gonna go around this curved edge, clipping the zipper to your exterior A pattern piece. And to make this a little bit easier, you can unzip your zipper so it's not so stiff. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So take that left edge and line it up with the bottom left edge of your A exterior piece. And then we're just going to clip along this rounded edge. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have this basted on, lay your exterior right side up. Grab your lining panel with the card slots but no zipper and lay it right side down. right over that exterior. And what we're gonna do is just match up all the edges and clip along this top curved edge. If you have your zipper unzipped, make sure to take that raw zipper edge and just move it out of the way. You don't want to accidentally sew it down somewhere. So I am just going to push it down and clip it to the bottom of my fabric, just like that. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once I have this stitched down, what I'm gonna do is just cut some little slits about 1 inch apart all around this curved edge. This is just gonna allow that curve to expand and be a little bit smoother in the finished bag. All right, once I have those notches cut, I'm just going to turn this right side out, unzip it to make it easier. There we go. And you can just pull on the zipper teeth to help straighten everything out. So now you can give this a good press with your iron just to straighten it all out and hold it down nicely. You might find that there is some bulk here, mainly the top of the card slot pocket. It gets a little bulky on the exterior. So now this is optional, but I am going to do it. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm just going to top stitch along this front panel all the way around at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once the top stitching is done, go ahead and open up your zipper. Grab your remaining lining panel that has that zipper in it and lay it right side up. Take your front panel unit and with both units right side up, line up that opposite edge of your zipper, the midpoint mark with the midpoint mark on your lining, and then mark the bottom right edge. So the bottom right edge of the zipper tab should be up against the bottom right edge of your lining piece. There we go. And then just clip along this curved edge. We're attaching the zipper now to the other lining piece, the lining piece that has that small zipper pocket inside of it. If it makes it easier, you can take this front exterior flap and then just push it back. If you're using quilt cotton everywhere, you can grab a pin and then just pin it down just like that. That way you don't get confused and accidentally sew it to the wrong edge of the zipper. Once you have 1/2 clipped, go ahead and clip the other half as well. Once you have it all clipped, let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste this clip edge down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once that's basted down, just put this to the side. So now grab your pattern piece C, and if you don't have the center points marked, let's go ahead and do that. So let's fold it in half. And once again, I'm just making small triangle cuts on the bottom and the top of that midpoint mark. Now to make this easier, on the interior circular part, let's make little notches every 1/2 of an inch or so that are just about 1/8 of an inch in. You don't want them to be too deep, but just all around the circle. This is just gonna help the fabric spread out more while we're working with it. And you only need to do it around the curved edges. So these straighter bottom edges, you can leave those alone. So now grab your front pocket unit and lay it right side up. And we're just working on that zipper that we basted down already. Take your C unit and flip it so that it's right side down and pointing up towards the top of the pocket. And what we want to do is we want to match up this interior midpoint mark right sides together with the top of our midpoint mark on our zipper, just like that. And now just working on one side at a time, we're going to fold down this right edge so that this bottom tip here comes all the way to the bottom right edge of our front pocket. There we go. And now we're just going to clip the rounded edges on the right sides together. Once you have one side completely pinned down, go ahead and repeat this for the other side. So I'm going to take the left pointy edge of my C pattern piece and lay it right side down against the bottom left edge of my front pocket. And I'm going to clip down there first and then just work my way around this rounded corner. Do your best to smooth it out really nicely and remove any pleats. Okay, once you have it all clipped in place, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I know that this is messy and difficult, so I'm going to sew this with the wrong side of the seam unit facing up, and I'm just going to go very, very slow using my stiletto to make sure I'm always catching underneath. It's very easy for this bottom zipper part to kind of slide out of the way, and then you just end up sewing on that C unit. You want to make sure you're sewing on everything. So just go slow and keep checking the bottom. Once you have that sewn on, make sure you check the back and make sure that everything got caught. Nothing slipped out of place and you don't have any little pleats anywhere. It looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is just reclip everywhere where I already have those slits in my C panel. But this time I'm going to also be clipping the zipper and that lining panel. So that way all of the layers can fold over each other to create a nice smooth edge in the end. Okay, so now you can see it's just naturally going to go up. So you want the seam to go behind the pocket unit, except on the bottom. So it kind of naturally does this anyways. The seam is just folding itself behind the pocket at the top here. But then once it gets down to the bottom, it goes towards the outer panel. So we want to do that. So I'm just going to push the seam towards the outer panel and clip. Do the same on the other side. Just get those out of the way. There we go. Now we can turn this, take a look at our pocket. That is such a cute little pocket, isn't it? I love that we use this bright pink today. Okay, so now on the sides where you have your little zipper tab over here, fold the zipper tab in half, right sides together. So just like that. So what we're doing is we're pretty much taking this seam from the pocket and the zipper and matching it up with the seam with the back panel, just like that. Clip it together and just clip like that. And this creates just a nice, very small little pleat on the side. Do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to take this and fold it together. And then I'm just going to clip it. Again, my clip is making sure that my seam allowance is towards this C panel and that my fold is right sides together on my pocket panel. So I have a little pleat there. So after you have those clipped, go ahead and clip along this entire bottom edge. Don't forget about your little elastic there. Make sure it's pointing up and towards the center of the pocket. All right, so now we're just going to take this to the sewing machine and baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so that is the majority of the work for this bag, is just this pocket panel. We don't have any more pockets in the lining, nothing like that. The rest of this is just putting the whole thing together. So now grab your two 14-inch long zippers. If you're using zipper tape, I suggest making them about 15 inches long each. These are the zippers that are going to go on the top of the bag. So don't forget to add your zipper pulls if you're using zipper tape. As you can see, I like to use the decorative zipper pull on this front pocket exterior, just like that. And then I just use more standard zipper pulls on the top of the bag. So now just to help us in the next few steps, let's go ahead and stitch back and forth over the edges of our zipper just to make sure as we're working with it, we don't have to worry about the zipper flying off the end. So now let's grab that front panel that we've been working on and lay it right side up. Take one of your top zippers and let's just mark the midpoint on it. So just fold it in half and clip both edges. So lay your zipper down so that when the zipper, when closed, is over on the left side. And then lay it right side down against the right side of that front panel and match up those midpoints. Clip those together. And then just go ahead and clip the edges of the zipper to that top edge of your front panel. The zipper should be a good amount longer than the panel. Now I'm just gonna go quickly baste this down at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted down, go ahead and grab one of your lining B units and lay it right side down against the right side of your exterior unit and just match up along that top edge. Make sure the sides are matched up as well. You don't want one panel to be totally off center from the other. You could also fold and mark the midpoint along the top edge of that lining panel just to make sure it's centered, and then line it up with that top midpoint mark on the zipper. Since this is a bit of a curve, it's a little tricky getting it centered exactly without those midpoint marks. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this pinned edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Since we have a little bit of a curve here, I am just going to cut a few slits. It just makes such a big difference when you add these slits and how the finish looks. Now take your lining panel and fold it back so that the lining and the exterior are wrong sides together. I'm gonna match up these edges and clip them in place first just to make sure everything is lined up correctly. So I just tug on this zipper a little bit to help straighten out that nice curved edge. And then I'll grab my iron and just iron over it to keep it nice and straight. Now, if you're working with vinyl here, you're not gonna be able to iron this. That's fine, you don't really need to. Pulling it straight at the sewing machine will help enough. Okay, so now let's take this back to the sewing machine and let's top stitch along this curved top edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have this top stitch, you can set this to the side for just a moment. Grab your second zipper and find the midpoint on this zipper on both sides. Get your back panel, and once again, let's find the midpoint along that top curved edge. And let's also mark the midpoint on the bottom curved edge as well. That's gonna help when we attach the gusset. Now grab your zipper, and when the zipper is closed, it should be on the right side this time. And then lay it right side down, matching up those midpoint marks. Clip in the middle, and then clip your way out towards the sides. And once again, the zipper should extend further than the back panel. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have the zipper basted on, grab another B lining unit and lay that right side down against the right side of your back panel. I'm gonna mark that top midpoint mark on my lining just to help line it all up. And now I can line up the midpoint marks on my exterior and my lining, and then just clip along the entire edge. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So once you have these panels sewed in place, let's just clip once again along this curved top edge. You don't have to do a lot of clips, just give it enough so that it can spread out and give you a nice smooth finish on the top. Now just take your lining panel and flip it so that it's wrong side of lining against wrong side of exterior. You can line up the bottom edges and just clip those in place to make it easier to smooth out that top edge. And then I'm just gonna pull along that zipper tape and finger press it first. And then I'm gonna grab my iron and press along this top edge. Now let's top stitch along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that top stitch, just put this to the side for just a moment. Now let's grab the remaining 2 lining panels using pattern piece B and just find that top midpoint mark on both of them. Now just grab one of those lining units and lay it right side up. Grab your exterior panel that has that front pocket and lay it right side up. And let's line up that top midpoint mark on our zipper with the top midpoint mark on the lining panel. Everything is right side up. So once again, we're gonna clip on the midpoint mark, and then we'll just clip along this entire edge, attaching our zipper to the lining panel. All right, what I'm gonna do is take this to the sewing machine and just baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now I'm gonna grab my zipper divider, which is just like a long skinny piece of fabric, and I'm gonna find the midpoint on this. Once again, just folding it in half and doing tiny cuts. Now with my exterior unit right side up, I'm gonna grab that little divider and lay it right side down and line up these midpoint marks on the top edge and on the edge of my divider, and clip there, and then clip out towards the edges. It should end up the same length as your exterior panels. So now we can sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now fold that divider strip back so that it's right side up, and the seam should be behind the divider strip. You can press this with your iron if you'd like, but now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along this divider strip at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, go ahead and set this to the side for just a moment. Grab your last lining pattern piece B and lay it right side up. Now grab your exterior back and lay that right side up. And let's just attach these together at their midpoint marks. So the midpoint of the zipper on the back panel with the midpoint on the lining. Start in the middle and then work your way out to the sides. All right, now baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so once that zipper and lining panel are basted together, grab your remaining front unit with that top strip and lay it right side down with the back panel right side up, and match up the top of that divider strip with the top of your zipper remaining. Get those midpoints matched up and then just pin all the way along the edge. Now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now this can get a little confusing. You want to flip the entire unit so that this seam between this back lining panel and the divider are behind the divider. So just finger press it just like that. Now you can press this with an iron if you'd like, but I'm just going to finger press it, and then I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along the other edge of this divider, so the side that's not top stitched yet, including that zipper behind it, at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna be honest, this is not the easiest bag, but when you use fabric that you just love, it makes it so much more enjoyable to make this bag. So now this next step is a little bit easy to skip because there's not a picture for it in the pattern, but you don't want to skip this step. Fold open your panels, take 2 lining pieces that are on one zipper and fold them up right sides together, lining up all of the edges, and then just pin around the entire lining panel. So just flatten out your bag so that it's easiest to clip these lining panels together. Once I get up by the zipper, I'm just kind of pushing the zipper away from the lining panel just like that. We're not gonna sew all the way up there, but I wanna keep everything as straight as possible. So here's one lining panel all clipped together. And now what we wanna do is we wanna sew along this entire clipped edge, so it's just the lining pieces that are right sides together. Start and stop about 1/2 of an inch away from the zipper. So if it helps, grab a marking tool. And I mean, you can really just eyeball this or use your grid marks on your cutting mat, but just go about 1/2 of an inch away from that zipper. We want to leave a little space up here for the next step. So we're going to sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have one of your lining panel units sewn together, let's go ahead and do the same with the other ones. So you can see over here on the side, I've got these 2 lining interior panels ready to go. So I'm just gonna fold everything else out of the way. So I'm just focused on these lining panels. And with the curves and the zippers, it can be a little tricky to get everything lined up. Just start with the bottom curved edges, and then you can kind of manipulate everything as you go. And then what I do is I just kind of pull on that zipper and flatten out this side as I work my way up towards the zipper. And then once again, I'm just taking the zipper and I'm kind of like, I can poke my finger into the lining and I'm just pushing the zipper up so the zipper folds away from the lining. This just makes it easier to sew. You're not sewing over the zipper or anything. It just makes it easier to get close to it. I'm gonna do the same on the other side. All right, once again, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch from where it meets the zipper. And on this remaining lining side, on the bottom, I'm gonna measure an 8-inch opening. And that's what we're gonna use to turn the bag out in the end. So I'm just gonna use my ruler to help me mark 8 inches. There we go. So now we're gonna sew between our marked line up by the zipper, all the way down to our marked line on the bottom. Leave this bottom straight edge open, and then sew the same thing on the other side. We're sewing at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have the second lining set sewn together, what we can do before we move on is press open this seam down here, which will make it easier to close in the end. So I'm just folding it back about 3/8 of an inch all the way along the edge and pressing with my iron. So I just fold one flap back and then I'm gonna flip over the entire unit and do the same thing with the other lining panel, just folding it back the same amount as I did on the opposite side and pressing with my iron. So now we're gonna attach the side strap tabs. Before we do that, go to the open ends of your zipper and we're going to stitch over them back and forth a few times right along where the outer panels are. So we already have it stitched over here, but we want it stitched right here because we want this nice and tight and closed. So as you saw at the sewing machine, I stitch on the back of the zipper because if you stitch on the front, it's very likely you're gonna catch your lining panel in it and you don't want that. You don't wanna catch anything in that stitch to hold the zipper closed. There we go. If you want, you can do it on the closed edge as well. I just don't find it a problem with the zipper separating over here. Now let's flip this unit over so that the right side of the exterior is facing down. You're gonna pull up one of your lining pockets and then just pull right next to the zipper at the seam of your lining so that it becomes like a little V shaped right there. There we go. This is just gonna help us attach everything. So I'm gonna use a couple clips here to help with that just for now. And then what you can do is pull your pocket so that that seam is open and runs along the length of your zipper. You see how my side seam for my lining is running along my zipper and it's like I have a little V right here. I know that this part is a little confusing, but the point of it is to make sure that we don't have any bunched up weird seam over here in our lining when we attach this little circular side panel. So I'm just gonna add a pin through the lining that I'm working on. So you can see I didn't add it through all of them. I'm just doing it like that. And now I'm gonna do the same thing with the other lining panel. So I'm just gonna pull them apart like that so that I can get the side seam by the zipper to run along the length of the zipper. And I'm just gonna press it open a bit. And now I'm just gonna use a pin to pin through the lining panel on the sides. And the only reason I'm pinning through the lining panels, honestly, is just to keep it out of the way. This does not have to be a neat thing over here. You're just trying to keep everything out of the way so that when you sew this spot right here, this is all nice and flat and smooth. We don't care about this. That's not gonna be sewn. We just want this spot to be really nice. So what I'm actually gonna do is press this with my iron since I'm working with quilt cotton, but because I have this waterproof canvas, I can't press that right there. So I'm gonna grab a small scrap piece of fabric and then just lay it over the area, take my iron and press right over that scrap. There we go. All right, so that is nice and flat now, and I've got everything out of the way as much as possible. Now we're gonna flip this back over so the exterior is right side up. Make sure you check underneath it to make sure everything is nice and flat. We don't need a lot of it flat. We just need this edge right here. Open up your zipper a little bit so that you don't have to worry about that. So now grab your strap tab, fold it in half, and we wanna find the midpoint of this bottom curved edge. Just gonna cut it just like that. So now take your strap tab and lay it right side down. So the straight edge of the strap tab should be pointing in towards the center of the bag. You can see on the bottom here, we have these two corners. Take that corner that's closer to the top of your strap tab and line it up with the edge of your bag. Do the same on the other side. So you can see I have this longer corner that's kind of pointed off the edge of the bag. And then line up that midpoint mark so that it's in the center of your center strip of your zippers. So I have the bottom corner over here. The top corner is poked off outside of my bag. My midpoint is lined up with the middle of that center strip between the zippers. I'm gonna grab some clips. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can use pins to help pin everything down. I'm just gonna clip it as best I can. So now starting at that corner that I lined up with the side of my exterior, I'm gonna sew along this curved edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way to the other side. Then I'm gonna do a second row of stitches just 1/8 of an inch further into that seam allowance just to really add some support to this. This piece of the bag can get quite a bit of use, so you wanna make sure it's extra sturdy. You will be sewing over the zippers. If you have pins underneath here, make sure that none of them are in our sewing zone. They should all be further towards the center. All right, so now if you flip this over, you should see that the stitches went over your lining. So it's closing up that little gap on the side so that the lining is all nice and closed. So now all we have to do is grab our scissors and cut along the edge of this curve right here, just to cut off the zipper and any lining that was in the way. All right, now let's do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna flip this back over. I can remove the pins that I used to hold down this edge. So I'm gonna start with my bottom side here. I'm just gonna pull it so that the zipper is nice and flat. And then I'm gonna pull my lining panels away from one another so that the seam runs right along that zipper tape. Few pins just to try to hold it all down. And I think on this edge, I'm gonna press it one at a time. So I'm just gonna press this one first. And once again, I'm gonna use a scrap piece of fabric to protect my waterproof canvas and just press right along that folded lining that I just did. Here we go. Now I'm gonna do the same thing with the other zipper. I'm gonna pull up my lining and then tug at the panels to separate them. And then just pull open that seam allowance so that it's nice and flat and runs right along my zipper. Once again, I'm going to press over this. So once you've done that, just do your best to manipulate everything. Again, this can be all junky, that's fine. We just want this part right here to be nice and flat. So use clips, use pins, use whatever you need to just get this one section here nice and flat. I think that's something that a lot of us deal with, is that we want the entire bag to be nice and neat and crisp while we're working on one section. But with bag making, that just isn't always possible. Sometimes the rest of the bag has to be a mess just so this one section can be clean. So now take your entire unit and lay it right side down. I like to flip it over, smush it down, flip it up, make sure everything looks nice and flat. That looks okay. Grab your remaining strap tab and let's find the midpoint on that bottom curved edge. All right, now with that strap tab, let's lay it right side down. We want to line up the midpoint of the curved edge with the middle of the divider between the zippers. And then once again, that bottom corner is going to line up with the exterior panels, and that top corner here is going to stick out past the exterior panels. And then just clip the sides. And now we're going to sew along this curved edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you're just going to start from one corner, go all the way down to the other corner, and then we're going to do a second row of stitches 1/8 of an inch from that just to add some extra support. All right, once we have that done, let's flip it over and just check to make sure it caught the lining, closing up the hole. Really good, looks great. All right, now let's just cut this zipper tape off using that curve as our guideline. You can go ahead and take this and set it to the side for just a moment. Now we're gonna build the exterior gusset. Now we don't have a gusset for the lining, just the exterior. So take your base piece and lay it right side up. Take one of your gusset side pieces and lay it right side down along the right side of the base piece, and then just line up those shorter edges together, and then just clip along that edge. Now we're gonna sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have one side sewn on, you can just flip it out of the way, grab your remaining side, and lay it right side down against the opposite short edge of your base. You can add a couple of clips to hold it together and sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have both of the side gussets attached, go ahead and press that seam on both sides so it's behind the bottom of the bag. Now, if you want to add purse feet here, you definitely can. I'm not going to. I think that this bottom base is just a little small for purse feet, but it would look beautiful. So you can see both of the seams are pressed behind the center bottom piece. Now we're just going to top stitch along the bottom piece on both sides at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. There you go. You have your nice long gusset for the exterior. So let's go ahead and just mark the midpoint on the gusset. So I'm just going to fold it in half and match up everything. It should all line up pretty evenly. And then I'll just clip the bottom edges for the midpoint. There we go. Now grab your bag unit and open it up. Before we get started, make sure your zippers are open. You're gonna want that in the end. Flip your bag unit so that it's right side up, and we're gonna start on the back. So take the back panel so that it's up top and lay it right side up. Grab your exterior gusset and lay it right side down and line up the midpoint mark on the edge of the gusset with the midpoint mark on the bottom edge of your exterior panel and clip together. Now take your side strap and pull it out, and then take the end of your gusset and line these up. You see they're the same shape. Line them up right sides together and clip. There we go. And now what we want to do is clip the gusset to this strap tab and to the side of the back of our panel. Now we have a lot of crazy curves here. This is not easy. I mean, it's just not. It's not an easy part. It can be challenging to not have pleats here. But if you can get it to work out, it turns out really, really nice. Remember, we're not including the lining. The lining is not a part of this seam. So just make sure you don't include it in your clips. So we're just gonna sew one section at a time. I'm gonna sew this clipped edge first. We're gonna start in the middle and sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now remember I said I don't have 1 1/4 inch hardware. I'm using 1 inch hardware. Right here where it narrows on that strap tab, this is where my hardware is gonna go. So when I get up to this point, I'm actually gonna increase my seam allowance by an 1/8 inch. So right around here, I'm gonna be sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead of 3/8 inch. So I'll go 3/8 inch all the way around until I get here, and then it's 1/2 inch, and then it's gonna go back to 3/8 inch towards the end. You're gonna stop 3/8 inch from the edge here. So it's pretty much where your fusible fleece is gonna end, but 3/8 inch in from this edge, you're gonna stop. I find sewing curves and things like this easiest with a zipper foot. You use whatever foot you'd like to sew this. Just go slow and use a stiletto and make sure that all of the layers are staying together. It's very easy for, especially right here, the bottom layer to come out. I'll be sewing with the gusset wrong side up. So you can see while I was sewing that on, it's a bit of a wrestling match. You just have to go very, very slowly. And then this other end is so heavy, you need to make sure you hold it up. For me, my sewing machine is on the side of the table and it likes to fall off the edge, which then just pulls on the whole bag. So just do your best to go slow. Figure out what your problems are when you're not sewing. So stop sewing, figure out what the problem is, solve it, continue on. All right, but we have one edge done. As you saw, I increased my seam allowance as I went over here. Now we're gonna do the same on the other side. So grabbing the left edge of our gusset and this left strap tab, I'm gonna line them up right sides together. And they should match up perfectly along this end. And then I'm just gonna clip along this entire edge, just like I did on the other side. Okay, once you have the other side pinned and ready to go, let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once I get to this strap tab over here where I know my D-ring is going to go, I'm going to increase it by 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So right here I'm going to have a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to decrease it back to 3/8 of an inch. We're going to stop 3/8 of an inch from the edge once again, which is just where a fusible fleece is. If you're using 1 1/4 inch hardware, you don't need to adjust the seam allowance at all. There we go. Now we have both of them on there. Once again, you saw I was clipping as I went. This side is a little bit more challenging. I will tell you, I have one tiny little pucker here. I'm gonna leave it because I am okay with that. And I think anybody who wanted this bag would be okay with that as well. A little bit of puckering is fine by me. You just wanna make sure you check all of your seams, that you caught everything, and this looks good. All right, now we're gonna do the same thing with the other side. So now we have the front panel. And let's match up the midpoints first. So the bottom of the front panel midpoint matched up with this opposite edge of the bottom of your gusset. Clip those together and then go all the way out to the edge. These are all ready together, so you don't even really need to do much, but you can clip this end together if you'd like. And then let's just once again do from the middle to the edge, one at a time, just like we did previously. All right, I've got one edge pinned and ready to go. So I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine. Once again, 3/8 inch seam allowance, except right here where the D-ring's gonna go, I'm just gonna increase it to a 1/2 of an inch there. This time, once I get to the end, I'm going to just follow along my fusible fleece and go all the way to that stitching before. So we're gonna go up the side and then across the short edge just to close up the entire strap tab. Once you have that edge sewn on, let's just attach the last edge. So everything is pretty much clipped together. We just need to clip along this curve now. Now you can take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm going to increase it to a 1/2 of an inch just right in this little dip right here for my hardware. All right, the hard part is done. Make sure you go over all of your stitches. If you have any really bad pinching anywhere, you might want to unpick it and re-sew just that part. Okay, so now let's look at the strap tabs. First, let's cut down these corners a little bit. And then let's trim the seam allowance down to 1/8 of an inch just on the strap tabs. We want these to be as thin as possible. All right, do the same thing on the other strap tab. Now what I'm gonna do before I turn this out is just around these corners right here, I'm just gonna clip into the seam allowance every 1/2 of an inch to 1 inch. Again, just to make sure these curves end up really nice in the end. And you don't need to do any clips along the flat edges like the bottom, just around the curved edges. Okay, so now insert your hand into the hole that was left in your lining pocket. And then I like to just push the exterior through that hole so we can turn the bag right side out. So the bag portion should turn out fairly easy. It's just the strap tabs that are a little challenging. So you can see up here we have where the strap tab is. What you want to do is push that strap tab right side out. And depending on the type of fabric you're using, this can be a little bit more challenging. I'm using this tool here. You don't want to use anything too pokey because as much force as you have to put on it, it's easy to rip the fabric. So I'm actually using the larger edge. So turning out these top strap tabs is a huge pain, to be honest. I think what you could do if you wanted is you could just not sew this top edge right here and just sew the sides. And then when you turn it out, then fold down this top edge and then top stitch this. That probably would work as well. All right, well, now that we have everything turned out, let's close up our lining. So we're gonna deal with these side seams in just a little bit. But first, let's close the lining. So we're gonna just poke out the corners of our lining. And since we pressed it earlier, we should be able to just pull these corner edges and it will just fold in on itself right along those press lines. So once you have that edge clipped, just go ahead and sew along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, go ahead and put the lining in the bag. And this is looking really, really cute. Now, if you used a thicker fabric like vinyl or waterproof canvas, you might notice that these edges are kind of folding in on themselves. To fix that, what you can do is you just poke those edges out. So I just put my hand into the lining and push out on those seams, and then add some clips to hold those seams. And then if you just leave it for a few hours or overnight, it'll help keep its shape much better. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can just press this and that'll probably help with it. So now let's add our rectangle rings. Take your ring and insert it over the end of your strap tab, and then you can see how the strap tab gets a little bit more narrow. Right where it narrows down, just wrap that over the bottom of your ring. And you can have this top edge go in towards the center of the bag, or you can fold it out towards the edge. I like it going in towards the center. I think it gives it a nice clean look. And with the angles of the bag and the angles of the top of the strap tab, it should all line up pretty nicely. So just push it down, line it up, and then add a couple of clips. There we go. Now once you have them both clipped down, you can top stitch along the edges to keep it in place, or you can add some rivets. I'm gonna add rivets today. So first, mark exactly where you want your rivets to go. I think for mine, I'm gonna actually have them go down instead of next to each other. I've got my 2.5 millimeter hole punch on my rivet press. And then I'm using 9 millimeter double capped rivets. And what I can do is just pop them in and snap them together before I press them. And that way it'll just hold it in place while I do my other side as well. So that gives you an idea of what it's gonna look like in the end. It looks really nice. That just popped out of nowhere, didn't it? Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. There we go. Now we can just put our dies on our rivet press. So I have a 10 millimeter double rivet die. And now I can just insert my rivets and press them closed. And there you go. And like I said, I'm gonna keep clipping this side as well to pull out that seam and make it a little bit more flat. It will stay that way pretty well after we take the clips off. You just have to let it sit for a few hours. Now let's work on a crossbody strap. Like I said, I'm using 1 inch hardware, so I adjusted the width of my strap to 4 inches. So when I double fold it, it'll end up at 1 inch. So I'm just gonna mark the midpoint line along the entire length of the strap. So I'm just measuring 2 inches in and marking a line. So once you have that midpoint line marked, you can fold in the short edges anywhere between 1/2 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, whatever you're comfortable with. And then clip that. And then fold these long edges up, wrong sides together, to meet that midpoint mark. And make sure you fold that short edge too. And just go along the entire length of your strap, folding and clipping. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can definitely just press this with your iron instead of using clips. Make sure you fold in the opposite short edge as well. Once you have one edge folded and clipped, just repeat that with the other edge as well. We're just trying to hide all the raw edges by folding them into the center of the strap. So once you have both of the edges folded, now just fold the entire unit in half, and you should have just a nice clean strap now. All right, once you have it all clipped in place, you can take it to the sewing machine and just top stitch along the entire unit, even the short sides and the long sides, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, last step, attaching the strap to the bag. First thing we want to do is attach one of the strap ends to our slider. So just slide it up from the bottom, up over the middle of the slider, down through the other side. There we go. And you want to have about 1 inch overhang here. Once again, I'm going to be using rivets to hold this in place, but you could also take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch right next to the bar and then also down here on the edge. So I have somehow lost my hole punch die in the last 5 minutes. So I'm just going to use this punch here to punch out the holes. I'm just going to add 1 rivet here, so I'll just mark a center point. There we go. And then I'll take my hole punch tool, insert it in, line up the punch over that mark, and just press. Now take one of the rivets and just insert it into that hole. And then using the rivet press, I can just press down on my rivet. And there we go. So now take your strap with the wrong side up and insert it from the center of the bag out towards one of the sides, just like that. Now with wrong side to wrong side, insert the edge of that strap up through your slider and then over that middle bar and then back down through the other side, just like this. And give yourself quite a bit of slack. So you can see I have my strap going through one of my rectangle rings and then it goes up over into that slider and then I have a raw edge still on the end. With that raw edge, I'm going to insert it from the outside, so the outer portion, into that rectangle ring and then just wrap it around, leaving about 1 inch overhang and then clip. So you can see this is kind of what you have now, just like that. So once again, I'm just going to mark a dot in the middle of this overhang. And if you aren't using a rivet press, you could always just sew a little rectangle here with like a little X, something simple like that. Once again, I'll grab my hole punch tool, insert this in, and punch. I'll grab my last rivet, insert it into that hole, snap it together, and then I'll just press it with my rivet press. And there you go, the bag is now done. All right, look at how beautiful this bag turned out. Oh, this hot pink is just everything to me. I am really, I hate using the word obsessed, but I'm kind of obsessed with this hot pink bag. It is so good. And look, like I said, leave those clips on those seams. Remember how my seams were folding in on each other and it looked kind of sloppy? I just clipped them for a few hours, took off the clips, perfectly stable, perfectly structured. Oh, this is such a cute bag. You know what? I think that if I was just gonna change one thing on this bag, it would be the strap. I think I would actually use white waterproof canvas for the strap so that we have like a color blocking situation here where we'd have like the hot pink and we've got the white from the zipper, a little bit of white on the front panel, and then just a white strap. I think that would look really cool. So let's just take a look at this bag because it was so fun to make and it was so much work. Look at those card slot pockets in the middle with our little pin tab down in the bottom. I love that. I just love the usefulness of this bag. It's the perfect size to put your iPad, your wallet, a notebook, whatever you need. You can put your, essentials right here, some cash, a credit card. Because of the material we use, this bag keeps its shape really well. So you could put purse feet on the bottom because when you put this on the table or something like that, it will still stand up. Now, if you're not using firmer fabric, if you're not using a firmer interfacing, I probably wouldn't use purse feet if it's like a sloppy bag because then it's like, well, the feet are on the table, but the rest of the bag is also on the table. You know what I mean? In my opinion, purse feet work really, really well on bags that have more structure because you really don't want any of the bag touching whatever surface you're putting it on. So I am so surprised with this bag. I love the variety. You can see in this one we have more of a brown, kind of a traditional look, you know, with the like leather-like vinyl. And this one is just like, hello, nobody can hear anything you're saying because the bag is so loud, but it is a fun bag. This is a perfect bag for adults. I think it's a perfect bag for teenagers, especially if they don't have a whole lot of stuff they have to carry with them. All right, let's look at the bag on just to kind of see how it looks. So once again, this bag hangs really nicely on a shoulder. If you just want to wear it like that, you can see it doesn't kind of slouch off. It has a good strap. It really is a fantastic size. And then if I want to wear it as a crossbody, it works really, really well as a crossbody as well. I love the just shape and style of this bag. So in my opinion, this is the kind of bag you wear every day. This is not really one of like the for funsy bags that you just wear out and about to a couple events. This is the bag that you put your stuff in, you leave it there for a few months, maybe a few years, and you don't really change it out. It's a lot of work, but it's one of those bags, like I said, that you're going to be using all of the time. It's constructed really, really well. So if you make a Prairie Girl bag, please make sure you tag me. I want to see your versions. I'm so excited to see more people make this. I know that the pattern online makes the bag look smaller. I don't know why that is, but for some reason I thought this was going to be a smaller crossbody bag. I love that it's a bigger one. I like that it's just like a standard size. I love that. So I hope that this tutorial inspires you to go out and make a Prairie Girl bag. Even if you are on the beginner levels, I do suggest giving it a try. I don't think it's a true beginner bag. I think you need to be up for a bit of a challenge if you're gonna make this, but it's worth it. So thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.